Why has the CEO of NIO, Li Bin, met with the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang? Welcome everybody. I'll take you on a little walk here from my hotel through Shanghai. No idea where we're going to end up, but what we're going to talk about is a bit speculative. So you may have seen or have not seen the picture of Li Bin meeting with the CEO of NVIDIA, chip maker, obviously a highly valued market cap, by the way. And this happened just a couple of days ago, right after the Beijing Auto Show. Li Bin is, by the way, right now a little bit more outgoing. It seems to me that this is an effort to give him a little bit more of a more real branding on Chinese social media, on Weibo. So he's kind of doing a bit of a vlog there, vlogging, video logging, similar to what I'm doing here. And I think the reason for that is that Li Bin has been in a couple of media scandals, for example, speaking very rudely about gasoline, ICE combustion car drivers, and that has not resonated so well. So he was kind of known for being a big mouth here in China, but those latest videos of him, you know, being very humble, taking public transport and so on, I think are a bit of a rebranding there, and it seems to be working. And this is why we know that he has actually met with one of the most, I would say, one of the most important companies of the current time, because obviously this is about AI and chip making, and that's at the core of technology and at the core of the US-China tech war, whatever you want to call it, right? So why would they meet? Why would Jensen Huang meet Li Bin, and why would Li Bin meet the CEO of NVIDIA? Well, I do think, first of all, NIO is a big customer of NVIDIA. And you wouldn't think so, because NIO is just a small company, right? And he's definitely not buying all of the A100s or H100s, those AI chips that are currently being, you know, in big demand and maybe not as easy accessible, especially not as a Chinese company. But that's not where Li Bin is the biggest customer, or NIO, for NVIDIA. No, it's in the area of those auto chips. So that the actual chips that are going into the car that are responsible for the in-car compute for autonomous driving. So we always need to separate this. These chips, by the way, are not part of any bans, as has been falsely reported in the past. No, these chips are widely available, and NIO is one of the biggest customers, believe it or not, because there is no other car that has, well, there are maybe one or two other cars that are having 4 Orin chips, but that much compute power is quite rare, even in the current EV industry. Just to give you a bit of a context, NIO cars, on average, the latest platform has about 10x the compute of a regular Tesla car. You could say the Tesla car is more efficient. It has more self-developed hardware here. However, the fact is that the TOPS, so the compute power on paper, is much higher for the NIO cars, and that could result in more accurate compute. Obviously, the reason why NIO also has 4 chips in a car is redundancy, so it's more safe. And if you have watched my previous videos reporting about the NIO Innovation Day, you will know that NIO is also using these chips, the idle chips, because not all of the compute power in the car is actively used all of the time. The idle chips are used in the background to serve the fleet for the collection and processing of images and videos for autonomous driving. So that's why NIO, with its comparably small fleet, because of course NIO is not one of the biggest car makers, but one of the biggest investments into self-driving technology by NVIDIA. It's one of the biggest clients for autonomous driving chips by NVIDIA. So I think it makes sense for even the CEO of NVIDIA to meet with somebody like Li Bin, because he's obviously about to lose a big customer. And I'm not talking US-China chip war, that those chips might be banned. No, that's not the case. I don't think it's going to get to this, because there are clearly no implications of being used, let's say, for military uses or something, all of the excuses that the US is using in order to ban those chips for the data centers. No, that's not the case. But NIO has announced that they have their own self-developed 5nm chip, and that one will replace the NVIDIA chips in the cars. So the reason for that is obviously it's more cost efficient for them. It's giving them more vertical integration. It's giving them more power over the algorithms and the accuracy and so on and so forth. Ultimately, you know, Li Bin and NIO will not be a customer. And yep, you still hear this from time to time here in China. They won't be a customer for NVIDIA in this regard anymore. So you could say maybe they're meeting because it is about the other chips that are used actually in the data warehouses for processing all of the data that has been delivered by the fleet in order to you know, train the neural nets, train the algorithms, and make better autonomous driving possible. So this is actually where those big A100s, H100s, however the actual chip is called, NVIDIA is producing new chips that are fitting the regulations to be sold into the Chinese market. So there are some workarounds, and those are the chips where Tesla just announced they have invested 10 billion USD, and Elon Musk is going so far as saying he thinks somebody will not be able to compete if you are going to invest the same amount. And well, it's very obvious to me that NIO doesn't have these amount of resources. They cannot invest 10 billions in those type of chips. And so for me, it's unlikely that NIO will become this big partner for NVIDIA to buy those kind of AI chips. So in that regard, I don't think the CEO of NVIDIA expected a big order here by Li Bin. And ultimately, this shows pretty much that NIO by now is becoming more and more self-sufficient also on this chips level. And it's telling you something in the regards that NIO is currently not perceived as an AI company, right? But what I just told you about that they are owning their own silicon when it comes to the LiDAR chip, when it comes to the in-car chips for autonomous driving, some call it God chip, or Tesla calls it the FSD chip. NIO has self-developed that and will be producing that in the future, or let somebody else produce it on behalf. We don't know exactly what's the details in that. But they own this part of the artificial intelligence stack, as well as the software side with their own OS. And this actually puts them into a position that developers will be using their OS in order to create applications in the ecosystem which can, for example, run AI applications in the area of autonomous driving and the digital assistant. So that is around the topic of Know Me but in the future possibly also extending beyond the car. At least in my view, that might be the case. I think currently you already see the improvements that NOMI is making, and that's the other part of the AI stack that NIO is owning, which is the large language framework that NIO is owning with NOMI GPT. I have witnessed NOMI currently in a NIO car just recently, actually today, and it's becoming much more talkative and human-like in the interaction. And I'm not only talking about a hardware tool and the emotional part of it, how it's even like a real human in a way, but also on the way of how it's gathering information, soaking it up, and how it's responding. And so if you look at this, these are 4 aspects from the silicon, the LLM framework, the developer tools, the software, and also the applications that NIO is owning full stack. And I think at this point, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, might be facing the harsh reality that most Chinese companies will be building all of this on their own, full stack, vertically integrated. And the question for them is like, how can they still get into the business with them? Because in the case of NVIDIA itself, it's more than 25% of the annual revenues, and maybe on the side of the autonomous driving chips in car that I just mentioned, NIO possibly makes a large share of NVIDIA's turnover. So I do think he met because he is trying to get some grasp on what are the plans of a player like NIO, which in my opinion is always at the forefront of what China is doing. He's been very visible recently, as I've mentioned in my countless videos, for example about the Beijing Auto Show, but also my Patreon only videos, that he's doing lots of partnerships. He's sometimes speaking on behalf of the entire industry about the fact that he thinks there should be more global cooperation. And I think that has resonated well, even with a guy like the NVIDIA CEO. And they're looking, openly talking what they can do together. That's my impression here. And what could this be? Well, for one, of course, I think NIO might be still happy to buy some chips from them. Maybe not in the in-car area, but maybe for training the algorithms, so for the data centers. However, my theory is that NIO, again, here is working collaboratively with other players in China. I've uncovered in previous videos ways how NIO is actually working on their own DPUs, so data processing units, and similar type of compute power and chips in collaboration with very big players like Tencent and so on, which are, by the way, big shareholders. So the ultimate outcome of this whole chip war must be that in any case China will build it on its own. We don't know how fast this is going to happen in this area in particular, but for the NVIDIA CEO this must be clear already today that this is about to happen. And so I do think he's still trying to get a grasp of where he can possibly unlock some future business in a collaborative manner. And that part which I just talked about might be highly political, but you know, maybe we get a different outcome with the elections, or maybe US-China at some point will get a deal, and then they might be more open for collaborating in this area again. And I also mentioned with the visit of Elon Musk these attempts to getting FSD into China, my theory that I spread on Twitter or X is that I think China will not allow to get the data out of this country. So China has implemented data regulation which has been quite strict. It's similar to actually privacy data regulations in Europe at least, which is also quite strict. So if you know about cookies and all of these EU regulations and so on, you might know about that. So basically you need the acceptance of people whose data is being collected and stuff like that. It's actually on the regulation level, it's not worse than what we have in Europe as well. But these data laws will most likely make it impossible for Tesla to get the data out of China and being processed in the US. Imagine they would have to send over all of the videos of Chinese roads and the edge cases here, but everything can be collected by the cameras of Teslas and so on. I would be very surprised if they allow those data points to be sent over to the US, where they have the compute power, where Elon invested the 10 billion in NVIDIA chips mostly. And what I think might happen is that Tesla and China will arrange a deal in which on high political levels they might strike a deal with both the US politicians and the Chinese politicians that the data will stay in China. However, there will be some, let's say, observed and approved data centers in China, which will build up local compute power. So there will be deals about how NVIDIA chips can make it here for processing some of this data. At least that's my speculation. I'm just thinking out loud here, but I think this is the way it could work. And that's kind of similar to what has happened before with Apple when they started to build their local data centers here, and Microsoft and so on. And for them, it opened the market here. And I think China would open the market here once again for Tesla, similarly to how they have opened the market before for Tesla, making them a 100% wholly owned company here in China, allowing that, therefore bringing them as a big pull for the Chinese EV market in general, building up all of these Chinese competitors, which are now hurting Elon. But I think they would do the same thing for FSD again. Bring somebody in who's leading in the technology, or perceived leading in the technology, and establish it locally. And what we will see is possibly that there will be deals around that, and the Chinese player somehow take some sort of a stake in that and benefit from that. So what could happen here for NVIDIA is that they will be able to sell more chips into the country, into China, and also this way build up the local compute power, and maybe some of the local players might be able to rent some of this compute power and make use of it. So that's quite a long story and a little bit of speculation here, but I do think these are reasons why NIO and NVIDIA CEO are meeting currently, and what they might be possibly discussing. On top of that, NVIDIA might be obviously helpful in the whole topic of designing chips, because that's basically also what they're doing, right? They are foremost a designer of chips. They let somebody else produce it, and maybe that's where NIO could also pay them some nice fees in order to build stuff on their own in the future. And so there are ways of collaborating in the future. However, I think as I stated, the days are gone at which China will rely on them as a way of importing, and that must be clear to Jensen Huang, and I think he's now eagerly trying to secure his business for the future, and that's where NIO might be an important piece. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comment section. Thanks for going with me on a walk through Shanghai, and then see you in my next videos.